Our next storyteller is a relative unknown. You probably have never heard of him before. I don't even know if he's ever been here at this place ever before. So maybe let's give him a first-timer's welcome, Sahand Devani.
Are you guys offended by the word fuck shit?
Yes.
I was reading a review about a movie that I watched a few days ago, and it was in the New Yorker, I believe. And it talked about a film with a few central characters, and one of the characters in the film that I saw was called Fuck Shit. And the reviewer said, you know, this is a very rough film, and it's about a era where people were just, you know, a bit rougher in the way that they spoke. For instance, the name of this character, which is, oh, we can't repeat it in this publication. And I'm thinking, what? I had just seen the movie a few days before, and the movie is called Mid90s, which is not a big film. It's the writing and directorial debut of Jonah Hill. You know, this guy from Hollywood does a lot of very simple comedic stuff, but he wrote a film about the youth that I had, which is weird. I'm sitting in the cinema next to a friend of mine who's a good 10, 15 years younger than I am. So all of the things that happened in the film were happening before she was born. For me, it was as if I went to high school with Jonah Hill. I got really paranoid. I was thinking, what class was he taking? I was trying to think back of, I'm looking at his pictures online and trying to imagine him 20 years younger. And then I'm thinking, why am I not in Hollywood? Because if we had the same thing, what's going on? But in the film, it follows a bunch of characters who have nothing better to do than to skate and to go to parties and get fucked up and kind of escape an undefined misery. And I realized that was us. We were that generation that for sure wasn't offended by the word fuck shits. But it's funny that the reviewer, the only thing he could pick out was that. And even though I was offended by his being offended, I then thought, so what are the other ways that I can define this generation? And I tried to go back to that time, right? I tried to go back to those weird 90s when communism had just fallen. So this eternal dread that somewhere, someone will maybe, try to carry a tray of coffee to the commanders, and then, suddenly he falls, and then his elbow presses on the wrong button, and nuclear bombs start to fly, and then in retaliation, everyone dies. We had just gone over this. Countries were celebrating newfound freedom, which mostly meant building McDonald's all over the world. And terrorism was a thing that existed, but not here. Of course, for me, that wasn't exactly true because I'd escaped a lot of that. But the idea that it was something that was localized and you could escape something by going to a different place, and we had escaped a place, we had escaped a decade, and now we were there, and the monsters, we couldn't define them, but we felt them here. And we fought them by skating and getting fucked up at parties. In my particular instance, and apparently also Jonah Hill's, it meant going to the snottiest high school in Amsterdam. I'll spare you the details of how I found myself subscribing myself into that particular high school. But I went to this high school, maybe some details are relevant. Maybe I was a little bit ashamed of the background that I had. I came from this poor immigrant neighborhood. I don't know what the thinking was, but I found myself at the age of 14, 15, suddenly surrounded by people who, for instance, if they wanted to go on a holiday, it wasn't a 10-day bus holiday to Italy, of which you spent 4 days in the bus. It wasn't being ashamed of parents who couldn't do the simplest thing like, filling in tax papers or actually disciplining you when you were doing bad in school because you were the one translating for your teacher to tell your parents that you were being bad. So I was in this school where all the rich Dutch kids went, which meant that there were exactly 3 people of color sharing some kind of skin melanin. That's how we bonded. And then there was this sea of money. That's the way that I can describe it. And these were the ones I found out very quickly who needed to get fucked up more than we did. And they were the ones who taught me to smoke a joint. And then later had to re-teach me because all the money that they were spending on weed, I wasn't actually inhaling because I didn't know that was a thing you did. These were the ones who showed me about shoplifting, but also about music, and sometimes it was combined. Actually, CDs were the one thing that we couldn't steal because they kept the physical disc behind. But, when Napster was a thing and downloading songs was a thing, we couldn't imagine one day we would have SoundCloud and YouTube. We were living off our CDs. This was a thing. We would go and trade the latest Wu-Tang Clan. We would be amazed when progressive new stuff like the Fugees came out, and not the score that everyone had, no, their first album, when, this 18-year-old girl just completely mesmerized everyone with her voice. And we had a culture that in every way was a copy of things that we saw in American films. And I don't know if it was because we saw those films and then we wanted to be like that, or kids all over the world were reacting in the same way to those shapeless, voiceless monsters inside of them. I remember there was this one girl that I had a huge crush on, and she wanted to get rid of her CDs, and I desperately wanted to have those CDs because I wanted to listen to the things that she listened to. And I told her that I would buy them off her, and I bought 2 of her CDs that I listened to 1,000,000 times. And she was collecting the money to buy tickets to go to America because she felt that's where she needed to be. But there's this one friend who was maybe the richest of all my friends. His parents, both of them, had this very high-level job. One of them was an accountant for a big firm. The other one was a lawyer. His house could have been a street. I don't know. It's the place that once he took me to after we went to a big stealing spree, which mostly was just me looking at rich kids stealing stuff they didn't need. I was petrified that, I had already left my parents out of the shame. I would think of the double shame of being caught and being brought back to them. And then their puzzlement, like, what happened? He went to the rich areas to learn how to steal. How does that quite... I didn't want to, there was already a lot of culture shock for my parents. I didn't want to add this one to it. So mostly it was me kind of watching them. And the one who stole the most was the kid who had the richest parents. He took me to his home. And his mom opened and saw his one kid, which was slightly colored, and with this iron steel smile welcomed me in and said to my friend, "Oh, you have a new friend. That's great. What's his name? In what class is he?" And I knew she wanted to know my level of education to see if I was good enough to be friends with him, who was the gang leader of the losers. I sat there at the kitchen table where we showed the little nonsensical things that we had found. And I saw his dad come in trying to connect to his son, which mostly consisted out of, "Oh, these are nice things that you bought. Do you have the receipts?" You know that if you keep the receipts, they can serve as a tax deductible. I didn't know tax deductible was a word. I did know that the sadness that I felt at that time was very, very real. These are the things that I saw. The things that I didn't see was my friend being alone in the room with his mom when we weren't around. And later he would tell us that after he bleached his hair, she would come up to him and say, "You look like a little faggot who sells himself behind the central station." I never returned to that house. In fact, the environment that I left behind, I never had to go back to, because I am so grateful that the lesson that I learned there is that in that little simple immigrant apartment, I had everything that I needed, and it was exactly what didn't exist in those houses. Maybe it was because the houses were so small and love needs a tiny little space so that it's just all over, and it's hard to sit down with it getting under your arms and under your legs. And then when another person enters that small room, suddenly the amount of love doubles, and maybe it just kind of disappears in all those different rooms among all the toys that the father bought and tax deducted and the kids stole. I don't know. I ran into the girl that I had a crush on many years later. I asked her if she ever made it to America, and she said, no, that was just a stupid dream. I think that was just to fill in something inside of me that I was missing. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I asked her what her plans were, and she's like, I think I need a baby. It's an era that's over, for better or worse. Now we've got other demons that have since woken up. Since 11 September, we can't deny here that things that have been happening over there that we fled are very much part of our lives. But that era, I guess it never disappeared quite from here, and I'm happy there was a film that suddenly showed me and allowed me to just witness it for one last time. Thank you so much.
Sahand, body. We should have him back sometime. He's got potential.